Imagine for a second that you are handed the keys to a nuclear submarine.
Okay.
But not just any submarine. You are given command of the USS Santa Fe, which at the time had the absolute worst performance record in the entire United States Navy fleet.
Oh, wow. The very worst.
Yeah, the worst. I mean, morale is terrible, mistakes are rampant, and the pressure is just completely suffocating. So how do you turn that sinking ship around?
Right. It seems impossible.
Well, conventional wisdom says you grip the steering wheel tighter, right?
You take total control?
Exactly, you micromanage.
But the actual captain of that sub, L. David Marquet, did the exact opposite. He turned it around by giving control away.
And that counterintuitive move is really the core of what we were looking at today. Marquet transformed the Santa Fe into one of the highest performing crews in naval history. And he did it not by making better decisions himself, but by systematically changing how every single sailor on that ship thought about their job.
It's wild. And today's deep dive is pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources to understand how that actually works. Yeah, we've got some great material.
We do. We're looking at Marquet's foundational book, Turn the Ship Around, alongside a 2018 meta-analysis on empowering leadership, plus some tactical training manuals from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga Police Department, and some heavy-hitting research on how organizations survive in high-risk environments.
It's a broad mix, but it all connects perfectly.
It really does. The mission today is to unpack how shifting from a traditional command and control structure to what is called a leader-leader model can completely transform a submarine, a law enforcement agency, and ultimately how you manage your own daily life and your own teams.
Yeah, and for you listening, if you have ever felt completely bogged down because you are just sitting around waiting for your boss's approval to do your job.
Oh, the worst feeling.
Right. Or, on the flip side, if you are a manager who feels totally overwhelmed because your team is constantly knocking on your door asking, hey, what should I do next?
Yes, decision fatigue is real.
It is. Well, the frameworks we are going to explore offer a very immediate, actionable solution to that. But to understand that solution, we first have to diagnose the illness.
Makes sense.
We have to look at why the traditional, globally accepted model of leadership is fundamentally flawed to begin with.
Right. So we're talking about the classic leader-follower model here.
Exactly.
And on paper, it sounds incredibly efficient. I mean, it's neat. It's how almost every corporation, military unit, and government agency has been structured for centuries.
Sure, it's the default.
The dynamic is simple leaders make the decisions and followers execute the instructions. Information flows upward to the boss and orders flow downward to the team.
But the problem isn't the theory, you know? The problem is the unintended behavioral consequences.
Right.
When you operate an organization this way, employees slowly stop thinking independently. Their initiative just plummets.
Because why would you think critically if your only job is to comply with an order?
Exactly. What happens mechanically is that people start waiting for permission to do absolutely everything. And worse, mistakes slide right by because psychologically nobody feels responsible.
Wow, yeah.
If the boss didn't explicitly say to check that specific valve or follow up on that specific lead, an employee thinks, well, it's not my fault.
It reminds me of a dysfunctional high school group project.
Oh, totally.
You know the dynamic. Everyone intentionally acts a little helpless, and they all just sit around waiting for the one smart kid to assign them tasks.
Yep, weaponized incompetence.
Exactly. The structure basically incentivizes collective apathy. Nobody owns the final grade. They just own the one little slide they were told to make.
Yeah.
And for you listening, think about your own workplace. How much collective apathy is just hiding behind the phrase, I was waiting for approval?
What's fascinating here is why this happens. The structure itself breeds this passivity.
Really? How so?
Well, in a leader-follower organization, compliance is rewarded over ownership. If you do exactly what you were told, you are safe. But if you take initiative and fail, you are punished. So human psychology adapts. People shut down their critical thinking to protect themselves.
That makes total sense.
They learn that bringing up a potential issue just creates more work for them or exposes them to risk. So they stay quiet.
Which leads to the ultimate fatal flaw of this entire model. The organization becomes dangerously dependent on a few key leaders at the very top.
Yes, the bottleneck effect.
Right. Those leaders become the bottleneck for every single decision. They're working 80-hour weeks trying to manage everything while the team is coasting.
Coasting and waiting.
And when those leaders leave or get promoted or simply burn out, the performance of the whole team collapses because the muscle of decision-making has completely atrophied in everyone else.
Which brings us back to Captain Marquet on the worst submarine in the fleet.
Right, Santa Fe.
He realized that if he played the traditional leader-follower game, they were going to fail. He literally couldn't be everywhere at once to make every technical decision.
I mean, a nuclear submarine is incredibly complex.
Way too complex for one brain. He had to figure out how to break the apathy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the solution he found lies in a seemingly small, but honestly radical shift in everyday workplace vocabulary.
Yeah, it really is a language shift.
It's the transition to the leader-leader paradigm.
So the core philosophy of leader-leader is that every single member of an organization should think and act like a leader within the scope of their own responsibilities.
Now, we should be very clear here. This does not mean everyone has equal authority.
No, definitely not. The newest intern doesn't get to declare a bankruptcy for the company, and a junior sailor doesn't get to launch a torpedo.
Right, that would be terrifying.
Exactly. It means everyone accepts equal ownership of the outcomes. And the mechanism Marquet used to build this ownership is what he calls intent-based leadership.
And this is where the language shift happens. In the old model, the language sounds like, just tell me what to do, or I'm waiting on approval, or my personal favorite, that's above my pay grade.
Oh, you hear that one all the time.
Constantly. But Marquet forced a completely new vocabulary on his ship. He essentially banned permission-seeking phrases.
Yep.
Instead, his crew had to use phrases like, I recommend, or here's what I found, and the most crucial phrase of all, I intend to.
I intend to. It sounds simple, but it changes the entire cognitive load of a conversation.
How so?
Well, think about a police investigator under a traditional model. They might walk into their sergeant's office and ask, hey, can I interview this witness?
Which sounds totally normal.
It does. But what they are doing is handing the cognitive labor up the chain. The sergeant now has to evaluate the case, weigh the pros and cons, figure out if there's enough probable cause, and make the operational decision.
Right, the sergeant does all the thinking.
Exactly. The subordinate just gets to be the hands.
But under intent-based leadership, that same investigator walks in and says, I intend to interview this witness because I believe they can clarify the timeline of the break-in.
The difference is profound. The subordinate has already done the heavy lifting. They've analyzed the situation, considered the alternatives, formulated a plan, and articulated a justification.
So the supervisor's job completely changes in that moment.
Totally changes. They are no longer making the operational decision from scratch. They are simply evaluating the investigator's reasoning and managing the overarching risk.
And reading through the 2018 meta-analysis on empowering leadership from our sources, the data really backs this up.
It does.
When leaders use these empowering frameworks, it positively connects to employee motivation, to their attitudes, and to their actual performance.
Because suddenly your brain is engaged.
Right. You aren't just following orders, you are executing your own plan.
You own the outcome. And when you own the outcome, you care a lot more about the details.
Okay, hold on. I'm listening to this and thinking about the practical application, and I have to push back a little.
Sure, go for it.
If everyone on a nuclear submarine or in a police department is just walking around declaring their intent and acting like a leader, doesn't that just create a ship of rogue sailors doing whatever they want?
That's the fear.
I mean, if I tell my team, hey, you're all leaders now, just tell me what you intend to do, isn't that a recipe for absolute chaos?
It is a totally valid concern. And honestly, it's almost always the #1 fear managers have when they hear about this concept. Empowerment without structure is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, that sounds like a disaster.
But the key is that the subordinate isn't just freelancing out there. When they say, I intend to, they're acting within very strict parameters.
Okay.
They're operating within legal boundaries, within organizational policy, and within an established framework of operational risk.
So it's not a free-for-all.
Right.
Which transitions us perfectly into how Marquet prevented that chaos.
Exactly.
He didn't just tell people to do what they want. He built 3 structural pillars, safety valves, really, to ensure that this decentralized decision-making was actually safe and effective.
And those 3 pillars are control, competence, and clarity. And you cannot have the first one without the other 2. They work as an interdependent system.
Let's start with control. This is the act of pushing decisions down to the lowest competent level.
Yes.
It's allowing your frontline supervisors to manage their own resources without needing to get 5 signatures from upper management. It's giving people the authority over their actual work.
But, as you pointed out with your rogue sailor concern, Control alone is chaos.
Right.
How do you give control safely? That's where the second pillar, competence, comes in. Competence is the safety mechanism of this entire philosophy.
So you have to actually be good at your job.
More than just good. If you empower people who do not have the technical proficiency to do the job, you aren't empowering them. You're just creating a massive liability.
You are setting them up to fail. And for you listening, think about how this applies outside the military.
Yeah, any corporate setting.
Right. If you manage a marketing team, you can't just tell a junior copywriter they have total control over a $1 million ad campaign. If you haven't built their competence on brand, voice, and analytics first, you're just throwing them to the wolves.
That's exactly right. Competence requires continuous professional education. It requires cross-training, honest feedback, and learning from mistakes.
Which changes the manager's role entirely.
It does. In a leader-leader model, a manager's primary job shifts from directing tasks to constantly teaching and building the competence of their team.
I was looking at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, UTC, and their police department's Officer Performance Initiative in our source stack, and it connects so perfectly here.
Oh yeah, that initiative is fascinating.
They are heavily focused on officer wellness. We're talking about sleep, physical fitness, and emotional regulation under intense stress.
Which a lot of places ignore.
Totally. Usually corporate wellness is treated like this soft HR perk, like, oh, we want you to feel better so you don't quit.
Right, here's a yoga mat.
Exactly. But in this framework, wellness is a tactical imperative. It is directly tied to competence.
And the underlying biology explains why. If an officer hasn't slept or cannot regulate their nervous system during a stressful encounter, their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, degrades.
Their judgment gets compromised.
Exactly. And if their judgment is compromised, their technical competence drops. And if their confidence drops, giving them control becomes dangerous.
Wow, so true.
So training their physiology and psychology is literally building the safety mechanism required to empower them.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you still need the third pillar to tie it all together. Clarity.
The crucial third piece.
Everyone has to deeply understand the mission, the priorities, and the ethical boundaries. Because if people know the why, they are incredibly good at figuring out the how.
Absolutely.
To synthesize this, it's like handing someone the keys to a high-speed pursuit vehicle. Giving them the keys is control. But if they don't know how to physically maneuver that car at 100 miles per hour, that's competence. Or they don't know who they are supposed to be chasing or why they're chasing them in the first place. That's clarity. They are guaranteed to crash.
That is a phenomenal analogy. You need all three to keep the vehicle on the road.
Yeah.
And when you have all three, the leader's day-to-day job transforms. You aren't controlling every action anymore. You are coaching. You are maintaining the standards.
And you are creating a culture where when a mistake inevitably happens, the first question isn't, who can we blame and punish?
Right. The first question is, what assumption do we make that was incorrect, and how do we fix the system?
Which is such a healthier, more resilient way to operate. But it does make me wonder about the context of all this. Marquet did this on a submarine.
Yes.
And a submarine is a highly controlled, enclosed environment. The variables are largely engineering variables. So how does a leadership model from a tin can at the bottom of the ocean translate to the unpredictable, high-stakes chaos of something like policing the streets?
Well, it translates remarkably well because law enforcement already operates in a decentralized reality.
Really? How so?
Think about the nature of the job. Police officers are constantly making massive, life-altering decisions alone at 2 in the morning under immense physical stress with incomplete information.
Yeah, that's true.
And they are doing all of this long before a supervisor ever arrives on the scene.
So the question isn't if they're going to make decisions on their own. They literally have no choice but to do so.
The environment demands it. The real question is whether the organization has proactively built the competence and the clarity for them to make good decisions when they are alone in the dark.
That makes total sense. And the military actually has a formal term for this, mission command.
Yes, exactly.
It's used heavily by the Army and the Air Force. The core concept is that commanders issue mission orders to enable what they call disciplined initiative.
Which is the goal.
As long as the subordinate is acting within the commander's broad intent, the clarity piece, they are trusted and expected to adapt their tactics to the actual situation on the ground. They don't have to radio back to base every time the wind changes.
And this isn't just a military or policing concept either. Researchers Carl Weick and Kathleen Sutcliffe studied this exact dynamic in what they call high reliability organizations, or HROs.
Okay, what defines an HRO?
These are organizations that operate in incredibly dangerous, complex environments where one error can lead to a massive disaster. Think air traffic control centers, nuclear power plants, or wildland firefighting crews.
So environments where failure is not an option, but the environment is constantly trying to make you fail.
Precisely.
How do they actually operate differently than a normal company?
What we can Sutcliffe found is that HROs survive through a mechanism called mindful organizing.
Mindful organizing, okay.
Yeah. In a traditional top-down setup, if a frontline worker sees a weird pressure gauge, they might assume the boss knows about it.
Uh-huh.
Or they might think it's above their pay grade and they just go to lunch.
Not my job.
Exactly. But mindful organizing mechanically changes that workflow. Frontline workers are deeply trained to treat a single weird gauge as a symptom of systemic failure.
Wow.
And more importantly, they have the immediate authority, the control to halt operations or investigate without asking permission.
So if an air traffic controller sees something strange, they don't route a request to their supervisor to ask if they can redirect a plane, they just redirect the plane.
Exactly, because a traditional top-down hierarchy is simply too slow for a high-risk environment. By the time the message gets up the chain of command and the order comes back down, the planes have collided or the building is already burned down.
Yeah, time is of the essence.
The people closest to the information must have the authority to act on it.
Looking at the UTC Police Department sources, they outline this exact philosophy in their officer leader model.
It's a great practical example.
It's a roadmap for this kind of environment. You give control, which pushes decisions to the lowest competent level. You build competence, which means training judgment and emotional regulation, not just physical tactics.
Right.
You create clarity, making the overarching mission unmistakable. You use intent language, shifting the culture from permission-seeking to ownership. And finally, you intentionally develop leaders, meaning every single person on the force owns a piece of the mission.
It's a comprehensive system.
It really is. So what does this all mean for the concept of leadership itself? I mean, does this essentially mean that the ultimate goal of a truly great leader is to make themselves completely unnecessary?
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yes.
absolutely.
Really?
A leader's true success is not measured by how indispensable they are. If everything falls apart the day you take a vacation, you haven't been leading. You've just been micromanaging.
That's a gut punch for a lot of managers.
It is. But true success is building systems, competence, and clarity that continue improving long after you leave the organization. The goal isn't to have officers or employees who need less supervision because they just do whatever they want.
Right.
The goal is to have people who need less supervision because they deeply understand the mission, they know the standards, and they can clearly articulate the reasoning behind their decisions.
It's the difference between building a thinking organization and a following organization.
Beautifully said.
To recap the journey we've been on today, we started by looking at the invisible trap of the traditional leader-follower model, where compliance breeds apathy and organizations become incredibly fragile because they rely on one person at the top to do all the thinking.
Then we explored the power of a simple language shift, banning "tell me what to do" and replacing it with "I intend to."
Such a powerful change.
That one phrase forces the transfer of cognitive labor. It forces critical thinking and shifts ownership from the boss back to the individual.
But we learned you can't just give people authority without a safety net. You have to balance that control with deep, rigorously trained competence and absolute clarity of mission.
Exactly.
And when you weave those three pillars together, you build a high-reliability organization that can adapt to chaos, whether that's on a nuclear submarine at the bottom of the ocean or on a late-night patrol.
So here is a challenge for you, listening right now. Sometime this week, whether you are at work, managing a project, or even at home organizing your family, audit your own language.
Ooh, I like this.
Catch yourself in the moment. Are you constantly asking for permission to act? Like, hey, can I do this? Should I do that?
Guilty.
Or are you doing the mental work, analyzing the situation and declaring your intent? Try saying, I intend to do X because of Y, and see how it completely changes the dynamic with your boss, your team, or your partner.
It truly is a game changer when you realize how much cognitive labor you've been giving away. But before we wrap up, our source stack leaves us with a brilliant and honestly quite difficult philosophical tension to ponder.
Yes, the tension between the two books.
Exactly. The sources recommend pairing Marquet's Turn the Ship Around with another famous leadership book, Extreme Ownership, by Jocko Willink.
Two very different takes on leadership from two different military veterans.
Marquet's whole philosophy, as we've discussed today, is that authority, control, and ownership must be pushed down to the absolute lowest frontline worker. It's about distributing the weight.
Right.
But Willink's extreme ownership demands that the leader at the very top takes absolute, uncompromising blame for every single thing that happens under their command. No excuses, no passing the buck.
It's a heavy burden.
So I want you to leave this deep dive and think about this. If you have built a perfect leader-leader organization where your frontline worker is fully competent, has perfect clarity, and has total control, and they still make a catastrophic mistake,
Yeah.
what happens next? How does a true leader absorb that massive crushing failure at the top without stripping away the team's control and reverting right back to a command and control dictatorship?
That is the ultimate test.
How do you own the failure entirely without stealing their intent? Something to chew on. Until next time, keep diving deep.